Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Season 4, Episode 5 of Stranger Things. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, let's start off with Eleven and Dr. Owens. That storyline ended up taking a twist I wasn't expecting. I think it's been a long time theory that people have had that Dr. Brenner was still alive. Didn't expect him to actually still be alive. That was kind of an interesting development. And the fact is, Dr. Owens is working with him. Probably has secretly been working with him this entire time. So I wonder what they always work on stuff together, and then when the opportunity arises, it's like, oh, 11 would never come back willingly, but now that she doesn't have her powers, this could be our fail-safe, but that's kind of messed up, because it made it seem like, and I guess Dr. Owen's justification is the world needs 11, so no matter who we have to turn to, who we have to work together with, especially like 11 had to go back to call him Papa, which is, messed up, because obviously, and I think that might be a theme that ends up coming up more later on, but obviously Hopper is more of a father to her than her own papa. Like, he wasn't a good person. The way he experimented not only on her, but the other children as well. It's almost sad, too, because it does seem like there's a little air of competition, because one of the other subjects, it's like, oh, I can't believe he's wasted so much time on her. Like, the fact is, there's even that competitive, I guess, it's like, right, all of them want to be their papa's golden child, and so they want to show each other up, be like, no, I'm special, I'm this and that. So it makes sense to some extent that rivalry between the siblings, the subjects and such, but that was kind of sad, because the moment she saw it was Brenner, she ran, because him touching her just brought it all back. And so when she wakes up and her hair is cut again, she grabs her head, she's going like, no. And I thought like, oh, that, like, because symbolically, letting her hair grow out means it's symbolic of she's not that girl anymore. She's not the 11 that was his subject. She's not, every time like her hair's growing out, it's just proof of just how much she's grown, that she's become her own person. And having her hair cutting and makes her feel like, I'm back to being that subject again. I'm back to being his daughter. So, but then she's kind of, it seems like everything is inside of her head. She's almost in this, I didn't even think about that just now. I was thinking of cerebro, but it's like, it's really like a, God, what's the terminology for it? I forget it. It's one of those tanks where you basically block yourself out from the rest. That's why 11 does the whole blinding herself thing, because it's supposed to be like removing your senses. I can't think of the word off the top of my head. It's but it's a tank that's meant to block away your senses and stuff, all right? So, immediately in my head, I was like, oh, it's almost like a cerebral thing, and that's not the case. But then I start thinking, I was like, wait, what Vecna does is that's kind of a cerebro thing, isn't it? I was like, I didn't even think about it, especially considered Dustin has his whole cerebro. I'm like, I'm surprised I never correlated in my head of like, oh, what Vecna does is kind of a, cerebro, the way it's kind of reading minds all at once. Like, it's a literal, because it's like, right, you go to this very specific area and you kind of connect out to this spider web of connecting with people, consciousness and whatnot. But nevertheless, putting all that aside, 11 is reliving memories. It seems like, I guess, because my thought was that the reason why her powers are a little like going away was because of the mind flayer. He poisoned her. He found a way to nullify her powers, but I guess maybe they've always been there. They're just, maybe the pathways essentially like in her mind have been blocked or something. It seems Brenner knows exactly what the cause of it is, but it's unclear what exactly happened, what the mind flayer did. Was it just a psychological thing, or it feels like it was a physical thing that, because it wasn't until after she got bit and injected by the mind flayer, and then obviously that piece of it was like warming around to her at the end of near the end of season 3, that it's like that's when her powers start really waning. So it wasn't really just like the amount of stress she put on herself, like going fight after fight. I'm sure that didn't help, but it seemed like the mind flayer drained her completely. So how it went about that, we never got an explanation last season, so maybe Brenner will give us a better understanding of what went down. But specifically, he wants her to find some truths. Like, I guess it's something she has to come to herself. That's why I'm like, is it also a mental thing too? Because he talks about the reason why this project's called Nina, because it's referencing a book where a woman was like the person that she loved died a pretty brutal death, and it caused like such a shock to her system that she buried the thing. So like she'd come to a train station every so often to see that person over and over again, despite knowing they're dead, but it was on some like deep buried trauma memory that she was blocking out. So it seems like the same thing is correlating here, where Brenner's, I'm assuming, referencing what happened at the beginning of the season, where we saw potentially 11 killing all those, the staff and all the subjects. And it seems like that memory is what's kind of at the core of all this, her remembering that, her blocking that. But maybe it has some correlation, once again. Maybe this has something to do with Vecna, maybe it doesn't. But I feel like it's got to be more than just like, oh, she snapped and killed everyone. I think there's got to be more to it. Or maybe it's like, no, like she got consumed by her anger and used her power. And maybe that's also why the Angela thing played out the way it is, because it triggered that deep-seated memory that she she didn't even realize was there. So it triggered something in her. So what that thing is exactly, who knows? But there's also that orderly who, or that worker there who took an interest in 11. I'm like, who are you? Like I was about to say, it's like, are we going to find out you're actually Vecna from... Did you somehow get sucked into... Once again, I'm still stuck on that, because I get the feeling like Vecna he's just too intelligent. And, you know, I mean, well, we saw the Mind Flayer operate it, but Vecna's on a whole other level, and that's why I'm like, is Vecna like that? I still get that inkling. I still can't completely let it go of like, is Vecna actually a person who is corrupted by the Upside Down? And like, if you spend enough time in the Upside Down, if you don't get killed by it, or maybe... Well, once again, my thought was maybe it's like it is a legitimate curse and someone was cursed and became Vecna, but it was an entity beforehand that possessed a human body, or a human body ended up absorbing it. That's why I'm like, who is that guy? And like, the fact is they're focusing on him so much, and he took an interest in 11. I'm like, is that supposed to be who that is? Is that like Vecna back when he was just a regular human? Maybe. I keep feeling like we're not going that direction, but I can't like get rid of that thought in my head of that potentially being what that whole situation is. But we'll hopefully get clarity in the upcoming 2 episodes or so. But nevertheless, 11 did wake up after like nearly having like a heart attack or something, because of the stress that everything was putting her under, and she tried to escape it. She does use a fraction of her power, but it's not to the point she can fully control it. It's not fully there yet. And so she could leave. She has the opportunity to, but she ultimately stays and goes into like, oh, Papa. And he's like, daughter. So hopefully 11 doesn't lose herself in all of this. I don't know whether she's just playing the role of like, right, I'll lean into this just so I can get my powers back. Because she could have left and tried to run, but it's like, no, I need my powers back. If I want to fight this evil that's coming, if I want to protect the people I care about, my friends, my family, then I'm going to have to get my powers back, even if it means working with my father, my Papa again, you know? So we'll see where things kind of go on that front. And since we're, in that area, let's talk about Argyle driving everyone, and sadly the agent ended up dying in the back, because he was like, no hospital, because that would have probably drawn too much attention, especially with the lieutenant colonel, who we saw. So it is confirmation. I figured it's like, I didn't know for sure if there was like some other party like going guns a-blazing like that. It's like, right, they know Owens is trying to protect the girls, so it's like, we're trying to get to her first no matter what. It's like, those are government agents you're also putting down too, which is kind of jacked up. But I guess it's like, right, if you're helping an enemy of the state, a monster, a weapon like that, then no mercy. So tearing apart the Byers' home like that was kind of jacked up. But they found the note that Elle had left Mike, that he had thrown away in the trash, and talked to the agents like, oh, you want to live? Tell me where they are, which that agent probably did. I would almost think he'd be the type that like would sacrifice himself beforehand, but he probably wants to live, and even if he did agree to help them, probably still end up killing him anyway, just because like, oh, you're on the wrong side of history, you're on the wrong side of this. So they can't be too far behind. They end up burying that agent, and Argyle's like, right, let's get the cops involved. It's like, well, we can't. But Argyle's like, right, the fact is those were government people that came after us, bad government people, so maybe the cops are going to be more equipped to handle this, and it's like, we can't get them involved. So Argyle's flipping out. Jonathan's recommendation is for him to go off and get high so he can calm down. He even he was going to make a little grave for the hero agent who, it's like, yeah, who saved Argyle, like Jonathan, Mike, Will, and Argyle's life. It's like, you're going to put our names? He's like, they're basic enough names that no one's going to necessarily tie them to us. Because, like, the whole point is, like, to bury him in an unmarked grave because they don't know if he has a family or not. So, poor guy. But once again, guy went out with a bang. I gushed about that last episode, but Home Dude was putting in work, soloing so many people by himself. So, kind of sucks that it played out this way. But they ultimately find out that the reason why they couldn't find the Nina, they thought it was a person. It's the operation, and they have a phone number, which that phone number was basically sending out a code because it was the phone number connected to a computer. It's like, we're going to need a hacker, which there's only one hacker we know. I was like, who's a hacker you know? I was like, oh, stupid. They literally showed you at the beginning of the season when she changed Dustin's grave, which I forgot to talk about in the first episode. Freaking Susie. And I love that Jonathan's almost like, what? And then Will had to sing the song, and it's like, yeah, remember we all heard it last season. Jonathan's like, no, you can't. It's like, right, she's the only one who could help us decipher it. So it's like, hey, we're Dusty Bun's friends, so we need your help. So that's definitely going to be interesting. So they're taking a quick road trip to Utah, so that's going to be interesting. Government's not going to be too far behind in that regard, but still. So all of that's happening. Once again, we are leaning more towards that Will and Mike thing where, well, Mike got his regrets because Argyle in his panic was like, oh, like they're going to kill your superpowered girlfriend, or then they'll kill us, or maybe they'll kill us, then kill your superpowered girlfriend. But despite all that, Mike's like, yeah, he might not be wrong. I don't agree with I don't like that he said all that, but it doesn't mean he's wrong. The fact is that he wishes things were different. If he had said the right thing at the time, maybe Eleven would have trusted him enough to come along with her. And it's the regrets about not saying the thing at the time, which Will's like, yeah, it's a lot harder to tell someone how you really feel because you don't know how they'll react. And you're like, it's really kind of leaning into that. And you're like, I mean, once again, is it what we think it is? It seems like they're heavily leaning and implying it is what you think it is, that he has feelings for Mike, in that it's more than just friends. It's just more than best friends. And he just doesn't know how to tell Mike, especially because, like, well, Mike also, like, is dating Elle, so it's not, so what's that? It's not like, I mean, and I get it. I've been in a position where it's like, I know, like, even though I know it's always been a weird thing of, like, confessing your feelings to someone. You can't help feeling the way you do, even if someone is with someone else. I mean, really quickly, like, there's obviously the whole Nancy and Steve thing, but obviously, like, Nancy and Jonathan are together, but there's something there that even, Robin is kind of picking up on, but also, so is Dustin. Robin's not really saying much in that regard. She's just making it clear, like, no, me and, she's like, right, because she's probably like, I don't want you to feel weird because I don't want you to think I'm dating your ex or something like that. That's where Robin's coming at it from, because she's the socially awkward person she is. Dustin's the only one that's kind of really leaning into the whole, like, oh, I think you and have your feelings for Nancy are coming back, but still. So it's interesting that both of them are kind of dealing with that. So it's going to be interesting to see where things kind of go on that relationship front for all of them. But I love the whole situation where obviously they're worried about Max when they wake up and don't find her, but luckily Max is upstairs, and the Mike and Nancy's parents are making breakfast, and I love Mike's dad being like, Mike and Nancy's dad being like, no, go ahead, take as much as you want or whatever. And then Dustin's like, okay, and then starts stacking his plate full of pancakes. I was like, that's what you get. If you want to be a sarcastic prick, you could get it too. Like, Dustin's going to take you up on it. I don't know whether he's recognizing you being sarcastic, but he's like, nah, just because you offered, I'm going to take you up on it. So you shouldn't have said anything being sarcastic. I'm like, oh yeah, go ahead, help yourself to everything. Take as much as you want, because Dustin's going to take you up on that. But I like that Max has been drawing all this stuff, and I love that it's like, oh man, we need Will, and Max is almost like, shut up. I know my drawing skills aren't as good, but shut up. But they were able to piece it together, and it turns out that it is the Victor Krill house that in that other world it was broken up into pieces. I even love Dustin does make a reference to Freddy Krueger. Once again, Robert Englund was in the last episode, and I've kept comparing Vecna to Freddy Krueger. But it's like, right, what said last episode was kind of right, but they say it in a very different way. But I think it's the same idea that Max found her way. Yes, Vecna was able to get inside of your head, but you were able to get inside of his head. That's why he was like, yo, what are you doing here, Max? Get out. I said that the entire plane of existence is kind of his plane of existence, but he like pretties it up somewhat to make you feel like you're in your world and he's coming into your world. But it's like, no, you're always in he brings you into his mind. He connects you to like some space in the upside down, like some mental projection of his world or whatever. But it's like, yeah, it's his mind palace essentially. So they now plan to go to Victor Krill's house because that's most likely where all the clues are to dealing with all this. So go in there, they go their separate ways, and I love Lucas helping out and being with him and Max, and I think it's just I like, it seems like they're getting back into a good place too, because it's like, oh, she's like, you know, she's worried that like, what if this song stops being my favorite song and it can no longer pull me back when Vecna I think I keep saying Vecna comes towards me. But Lucas is like, nah, then, and he talks about the fact is he's a big fan too. She's like, really? He's like, yeah, it saved your life and everything. And he's like, yeah, we're going to, find what it takes to, kick Vecna's butt and everything. And, it's like, oh yeah, we'll play this piano and unlock something secret. And she laughed and he's like, I miss it. She's like, what? He's like, your laugh. And I was like, oh, look at you, Lucas. It's sweet. Cause she's like, oh, like, aren't you too cool? He's like, what? I'm not cool. I like the moment that they had. I thought that was really sweet to see that, you know, they are being at least heading back in the right direction after everything. Cause Max just was pushing him away because she didn't really know how to talk to anybody about everything that she was going through, what she was feeling at the time. Didn't really know how to put in words. Cause it's a lot. It's hard to talk about your feeling. I mean, even Will's going through that currently, so once again, that spider thing keeps popping up. I thought was interesting because Steve did find like some glass jars, more like, and there was stuff in it, and I couldn't tell what it was. I didn't know if those were spiders or not because one did crawl up Steve, but I didn't know what was. I didn't get quite a good enough look at what was in those jars. But yeah, I love the whole when Steve tried to quote like that Sherlock Holmes quote that Dustin had said to him and he butchered it. Nancy's almost like, wait, what? I thought that was kind of interesting. And I do enjoy those two being somewhat awkward around each other because Steve's like, you know, oh, I'm glad that you and Robin become friends. Like, oh, maybe we could all hang out sometimes. Me, Robin, you, and Jonathan. Like, you know, that'd be kind of nice. Oh, yeah, I also love the Steve and Dustin thing where, like, they split up because everyone goes, there's Robin and Nancy, and then there's Lucas and Max, and then, like, Steve let out a sigh. Dustin's like, wait, did you just sigh? He's like, no, I didn't sigh. He's like, what, you like hanging out with me? He's like, no, it's just, we're always together. He's like, what, is that a bad thing? He's like, no, I didn't sigh. It's nothing. It's fine. It's just, we're always, he's like, what, am I boring or something? I'm like, oh, poor Steve. I mean, to be fair, it's like he kind of wants to hang around like the people his own age because even he's like, at this point, I keep being a babysitter. And I mean, come on, you were super excited to have Dustin back. It was like, oh, Henderson. He was so excited because they are such bros. But it's just someone's like, I need time away from my bros. I want to hang out with someone else. If he was stuck with just Max or Lucas, he'd probably still be complaining. But it's like, so he wants to hang on like Robin or Nancy, but probably more specifically Nancy. But either way. I thought that I'm surprised things didn't even get creepier in the house than they thought. I thought that was going to, I mean, it is going to be a focal point because it is where Vecna is, just in the Upside Down. But it's like that house is the key, the centerfold of all of this. But I thought it'd be, at least where it's been presented so far, I think it's being presented as probably like the staging ground potentially for the final area, because final battle or whatever, because that's where Vecna's like taking control from. But it's, other than that, it's not continuously been like, it's only because I figured that'd be like a big chunk of the season or something would be that house. And it's like, oh, it's episode 5 and we're only getting to the house now. And even then, it's only like part of the team investigating it, and it's only part of the episode. So it's not like a full episode exploration. So I just think that's interesting. And the lights were leading them. And I love that Nancy made the comparison of like, right, the Christmas lights when Will was trying to talk in the Upside Down. And the lights led them to this very specific light bulb, which I love. Once again, that camera angle, just like it flips and it shows us the Upside Down where Vecna is. So the question is, like, I don't think that was Vecna leading them to it. I think maybe some spirit, whether it might be Victor's wife or children. Well, because his son died last. His son was in a coma, and then, I forgot to talk about that. Victor specifically said his son survived but was in a coma and then died a week later. So I wonder, is it his spirit or some other spirits that are tied to that place trying to point them in the right direction? Like, who, but it would need to be someone from the Upside Down doing that. So maybe it is Vecna doing, but I'm like, for what purpose? Or is it just supposed to be a thing of, oh, I see you, I can get to you at any time I want to? Like, this, I'm letting you know where I am because there's nothing you can do about it. I don't know if it's like your villain, like, puffing his chest and taunting you, or whether it felt like more like someone else was leading them, something or someone else leading them there. So I thought it was interesting that while that was all going down, I believe that, it was still this episode that they were having that funeral for Chrissy, and one of the guys in Jason's group, was it Patrick, ended up seeing like the clock and everything, and so they're coming up with a plan. It sucks for Eddie that one of the guys on the team, so it does seem like the rest of the team is involved too. They were probably off somewhere else aside from Patrick, Jason, and Andy and Lucas, who were one team. The rest of the team probably split up in their own to look around town. They're splitting up again to try and find other places that Eddie might have gone. And one of them suggested Reefer Rick's place, because someone had nearby was fishing, and they're like, oh, I guess that guy's out of jail. I was like, oh, so that's why we haven't seen Reefer Rick around, because he's locked up. So that ended up getting around that Reefer Rick might be out. And so with everything going on, that dude was like, oh, my mom was telling me to stay away and all that. So, but Patrick was like, yeah, maybe we should stay away from these people, this Hellfire Club, because maybe they've cursed us, because he believes himself to be cursed because he's been seeing stuff. So he saw the clock and everything, the nosebleed. So he's been off. And sadly, Vecna ends up getting him later on in the episode. I was wondering, I didn't expect him to get out in the middle of the water and get got by Vecna. I thought it was going to happen when Jason was going to chase after Eddie, who's out on the boat. I thought in that moment which I was thinking, like, hopefully it works out for Eddie, because it's like, okay, I had nothing to do with that. You saw that, but Jason will still probably be like, you did something satanic, because, Jason said he doesn't believe in the supernatural, so it might be a thing of him being like, you did this, didn't you? But Eddie had to be like, no, it wasn't me. Chrissy, Fred, Patrick, that wasn't me. That's something else, and probably tries to explain, but if he tries to, like, Jason's not going to listen, because Jason's so filled with rage that, he's not like, oh, you're lying, you did some satanic thing. Just sadly, Eddie being in a vicinity just adds more validity to, like, oh, you're the one responsible for this, sadly. So that's all going to fall on Eddie. Like, even if it was far away and they weren't in that area with Eddie, he'd still be like, oh my God, Patrick was right. Eddie cursed us, or at least cursed him. So poor Patrick. And especially afterwards, like, what happens? His body falls in the water. I'm sure it's going to, like, bubble to the surface, maybe. So still sucks. Once again, we are racking up bodies. Obviously, I guess you can't expect... season 3 racked up, like, at least 30 plus bodies, because those 30 who ended up sacrificing themselves to become the body for the Mind Flayer on this side of the world. But other than that, because I want to say, was it someone else besides Barbara that died in season 1? I don't remember. Like, Barbara was, like, the big death. was a pretty big one, but I'm like, I don't, other than people that 11 might have killed or the demo, I'm trying to think like, I think Barber's, yeah, in season 2, I want to say Bob might have been the only death. Like, they've really ramped up the deaths, and obviously in this one it's a much slower burn, because it's like, yeah, they're kind of basically getting killed by a supernatural serial killer. So, the body count has not quite reached season 3 yet. I don't think they're going to go that hard in the paint. I mean, it depends if you stack everything together. It's probably easily going to equal that. So, there's all of that. So we are on the other front. We have everything with Joyce and Murray and Hopper. First, let's talk about Hopper's situation. He's getting, once again, the piss beaten out of him because of everything, and it seems like they're taking him to the cage fighting area where they're going to run into monsters from the other side, like the Demogorgon. So it's a place all the prisoners are sent to die. And Hopper wanted to beat up Anatov because it's like, right, you promised me that everything was going to be okay. But even he recognized what Anatov said was right. I knew the risk in all of this, and I took it anyway, knowing that risk. We took a gamble, and we both lost. And at the end of the day, Anatov is trying to keep Hopper alive by being like, yo, you gotta keep going, you gotta go see your woman. It's like, she's not my woman, and she's better off without me. He's like, I in the beginning thought I was cursed, but he believes himself to be the curse, because he talked about his time going into the military so his dad wouldn't look at him as such a fuck up. Then he talks about everything that he went through. I guess because of his time, he was talking about, like, right, the chemicals they were around and stuff like that when it came to, like, the chemical warfare and stuff. And it did something to him, because he's like, right, a whole bunch of other people came back and tried to have families and things. There were issues with the pregnancies and such. So, but even knowing that, he got married with his ex-wife, and they had a daughter, and Sarah was healthy up until a point. And so it's like, right, she ended up leaving me, and he was like, right, and she didn't even blame me. At least he's like, not with her words. So he also says that, for obviously back when we met Hopper in season 1, drinking and drugs was his way to compensate with things, everything that he lost. But Elle and Joyce made him feel like, no, they needed me. But he's like, no, they didn't need me. I needed them. They were what I needed to kind of pick myself up, to piece myself together. And he's like, if I never dragged Joyce into this, she is going to be heading towards death, and that's on me. So continuously to believe himself to be cursed, and Anatov saying, like, right, you were right about one thing, this is where we're going to die. So we'll see how things shape up out of this. Won't Anatov survive this season? Maybe, maybe not. But because it's, when that when the cage battle starts, it's probably, not everyone's going to make it out of this. To be fair, Hopper has a lot more experience than the others there, because because everyone that's probably ever stepped in the ring with the Demogorgon has probably died. He's probably the only one that, like, has had experience running into this thing. Like, he's having faced all that they faced over these past 3 adventures, But at the same time, there's the whole situation with Yuri, when she tries to justify what he's done, because it's like, right, with the money I get from this, I'll be able to get my daughter whatever she wants, and my mom, will be very, very proud. And so Murray talks about the fact is he's got his black belt, and Joyce is kind of relying on it. He's like, well, I've never actually used it in a real life scenario, only against the other students. And the moment he said that, I was like, are they going to be kids? And she's like, what age? He was like, under 13, except for home dude, he was 16, and he was almost about to have a birthday, and Joyce was almost like, but then because Murray was reluctant, but then he's like, he's like, no, Yuri probably doesn't have experience like home dude from the class. Thanks, Joyce, I'm really hyped up now. So I love that Joyce had such belief in him about the black belt thing, and now her belief in him shrunk, but at the same time, Murray didn't have belief in himself, but because of Joyce, he now does. I love that inverse, so... And when Murray had his moment, I was like, oh, please don't tell me Murray's going to embarrass himself. I was like, oh, he's going to talk, he's going to hype himself up, and it's not going to be good. Nope, your boy went and did some work. I was like, yeah, Murray, get him. I was like, yes, thank goodness you didn't embarrass yourself. Well, it probably helps that Yuri probably, he was throwing some punches and stuff, but like, Yuri isn't like a well-trained fighter, so luckily Murray was able to do his thing, and I love that he's like, just saying all that mantra stuff as he's like knocking him out. He's like, yeah! Even though Joyce literally told you not to knock the dude out because you need him to fly the plane. End up turning off their propellers in their attempt to, the propeller to attempt to get the plane under control. And we see them crash. So that sucks because it's like, cool, because now you're here. Well, who knows how far they are from Russia, but you're there, but you also, the plane's messed up. At least we know one of the wheels necessary to take off and land is messed up. So getting back up might not be the easiest thing. And yeah, where you go from here is going to be interesting. I didn't even think about it. I should have talked about it. I do think it's such a dope thing that this season is so expansive. Because typically the past 3 seasons have all mainly take place in Hawkins. It's always been like Hawkins typically ends up being like the 90% mark of like how much of the story takes place there. Season 2, you had one episode where you kind of were away from that. I'm trying to, because I know Jonathan and Nancy went to visit Murray in season 2, so, and then Joyce, Alexei, and Hopper went there in season 3. But now it's a situation where there's so many groups. Obviously, there's California with like Elle, Mike, Jonathan, Will, and them. Then you have now Hopper in Russia. You have, initially Murray and Joyce in Alaska, but now they're on their way to Russia. If they haven't already crash landed there. And then finally you have like the Hawkins team. And so we really spread across the map of like where all the characters are, and they're not like super close to each other. They're pretty far from each other in like four very large and distinct different locations. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.